The satisfying crack of Evelyn Harrington's palm against Marcus Cole's face echoed across the Grand Manhattan Investment Summit like a gunshot. 500 of America's wealthiest investors froze mid-conversation. Champagne glasses stopped halfway to lips. Every phone in the ballroom rose like a synchronized army. "Security, get this fraud away from my table. People like you don't belong here." The black man stood perfectly still, his cheek burning red, his expression calm, almost amused. She had no idea. The man she just slapped controlled whether her family's $1.5 billion deal would live or die. Have you ever watched someone destroy 3 generations of wealth in 3 seconds? Comment below what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The sound was unmistakable. Not the polite tap of a woman making a point. Not the theatrical gesture of someone seeking attention. This was violence. Pure, unfiltered, entitled violence. Evelyn Harrington's diamond-studded hand connected with Marcus Cole's face with enough force to turn his head sideways. The crack echoed off the marble walls of the Grand Manhattan Hotel's legendary ballroom, cutting through conversations, stopping waiters mid-stride, freezing 500 of America's most powerful investors in place. For exactly 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Then the phones came up. Dozens of them. Recording, capturing, documenting what would become the most viral moment of the year. Marcus Cole didn't stumble, didn't flinch. He simply turned his head back slowly, methodically, like a man who had faced far worse and survived. A thin line of blood appeared at the corner of his lip where Evelyn's massive engagement ring had cut him. He touched the blood with his finger, looked at it, then looked at Evelyn with an expression that would haunt her for the rest of her life. He smiled. "Security." Evelyn's voice was shrill now, desperate, sensing somehow that her moment of triumph was already curdling into something else. "Are you deaf? I said get this con artist out of here. He doesn't belong at this table. He doesn't belong in this room." 2 security guards approached hesitantly, their hands hovering near their radios, clearly uncertain how to proceed. They'd been hired to handle drunk guests and lost caterers, not whatever this was. Marcus held up one hand, just one. The guards stopped immediately. "That won't be necessary, gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Mrs. Harrington was just expressing her opinion about who belongs where. I found it educational." He pulled a silk handkerchief from his breast pocket, navy blue monogrammed with initials that meant nothing to Evelyn, but would soon mean everything, and dabbed at the blood on his lip with the casual precision of someone polishing a trophy. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Evelyn stepped closer, emboldened by her own fury. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I know exactly who you are, Mrs. Harrington." Marcus folded the blood-stained handkerchief carefully. "Third-generation Harrington development. Your grandfather built strip malls in New Jersey. Your father expanded into commercial real estate. Your husband is currently trying to save the company from bankruptcy with a resort development he can't afford." Evelyn's face went pale for just a moment before the rage returned. "You've been researching us, stalking us. That's exactly what I told Thomas. You people are always looking for angles, always trying to take what doesn't belong to you." "You people?" Marcus repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air like poison. Interesting choice of phrase. "You know exactly what I mean." "I do. That's the problem." Thomas Harrington finally pushed through the crowd, his face the color of old newspaper. He'd been across the room schmoozing with a group of potential investors when he'd heard his wife's voice rising above the ambient noise. By the time he reached the table, the damage was catastrophic and still spreading. "Evelyn, what have you done?" "What needed to be done, Thomas? This man was sitting at our table, pretending to be an investor, pretending to belong here. Someone had to say something." "Evelyn." "No. You've always been too soft, Thomas. Too worried about appearances. Too afraid to stand up for what's rightfully ours. Well, I'm not afraid. I will never be afraid to put people in their place." Thomas turned to Marcus, his hands literally shaking. "Sir, I am so incredibly sorry. My wife has been under enormous stress. She doesn't mean—" "Your wife means exactly what she says, Mr. Harrington." Marcus's voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it more devastating. "That's the most honest thing about her. Please, if there's anything I can do." There was. Marcus tucked the folded handkerchief back into his pocket. Past tense. He turned to leave, then paused at Evelyn's shoulder. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive, subtle, the kind that cost more than most people's mortgage payments. "Some mistakes can't be undone, Mrs. Harrington. I hope the satisfaction was worth it." He walked away with the measured pace of a man who had nowhere to hurry to because he already owned everywhere he needed to be. The crowd parted for him automatically, instinctively, the way civilians part for someone with obvious authority. Evelyn watched him go, with her chin raised high, still riding the adrenaline of her performance. Around her, a few society friends nodded approvingly. Margaret Whitfield, her oldest friend and fellow guardian of social hierarchies, squeezed her arm. "Someone had to do it, darling. These people are everywhere now acting like they belong." "Exactly. Thank you, Margaret. At least someone understands." But something was wrong. The three investors who had been sitting with Marcus weren't applauding. They weren't nodding. They were staring at Evelyn like she'd just announced her plans to burn down an orphanage. One of them, a silver-haired man Evelyn recognized from the Forbes 400 list, stood up slowly, his napkin falling from his lap unnoticed. "Mrs. Harrington," he said, his voice ice-cold, "do you have any idea what you've just done? I removed a fraudulent intruder from a private event. You should be thanking me." "A fraudulent intruder." The man repeated the words like they tasted rotten. "That intruder is the reason most of us are here tonight. That intruder is the most successful real estate investor in America. That intruder is Marcus Cole." The name hit Evelyn like a second slap. Marcus Cole. She knew that name. Everyone in real estate knew that name. Marcus Cole the ghost. Marcus Cole the legend. Marcus Cole, who had built a $50 billion investment empire from nothing, who never gave interviews, who never appeared in photographs, whose face was unknown to almost everyone in the industry, because he preferred it that way. Marcus Cole, who had single-handedly transformed a dozen failing development companies into gold. Marcus Cole, whose backing was the single most valuable asset in the real estate world. Marcus Cole, who was supposed to be evaluating Harrington Development for a $1.5 billion partnership that would save everything. "No," Evelyn whispered. "No, that's not possible. Marcus Cole is black." The Forbes 400 investor's voice dripped with contempt. "Yes, Mrs. Harrington, Marcus Cole is black. Is that the part that surprised you? Or is it that a black man could possibly be more successful than your entire family combined?" Thomas Harrington's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling. "Oh God, oh my God. Evelyn, what have you done?" "I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? He was just sitting there acting like he belonged." "He did belong. He belongs more than any of us. His investment firm was supposed to meet with us tomorrow to finalize the resort deal. The deal that saves our company. The deal that's been keeping me awake every night for 6 months." "Then we'll apologize. We'll explain. It was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding." Thomas's voice cracked. "You called him a fraud. You called him a con artist. You slapped him across the face in front of 500 witnesses. You told him that people like him don't belong. What part of that was a misunderstanding, Evelyn?" Around them, the whispers had begun. The ballroom that had frozen in shock was now buzzing with urgent conversation. Phones were being furiously tapped. Messages were flying across the room and around the world. Within minutes, the videos would be online. Within hours, they would be viral. Within days, Evelyn Harrington would become the most hated woman in America. But she didn't know that yet. What she knew in that moment was that her husband was looking at her like he'd never seen her before. Like he was seeing something ugly and rotten that had been hidden beneath the surface all along. "Thomas, please. I was trying to protect us. I was trying to protect our family." "Protect us?" Thomas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You just destroyed us, Evelyn. Everything my father built, everything my grandfather started, gone. Because you couldn't stand to see a black man sitting at a table you thought belonged to you. That's not fair." "It's completely fair. It's the most fair thing I've ever said to you." Thomas pulled out his phone with trembling hands. "I have to call the board. I have to try to contain this somehow. Maybe if I can reach Marcus directly, apologize personally." "He won't take your call," said the Forbes 400 investor who had been watching the marital meltdown with grim satisfaction. "Marcus Cole never gives second chances. It's one of the reasons he's so successful. He trusts his first impressions. There has to be something." "There's nothing. Your wife made sure of that." The investor picked up his own phone. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to call my own partners. We were planning to co-invest with Marcus on several projects. We'll need to reassess our relationship with anyone connected to the Harrington name." He walked away without looking back. One by one, the other investors at the table followed. Each departure was a death knell, a withdrawal of support, a closing door. Within 5 minutes, Thomas and Evelyn Harrington were standing alone at a table meant for 8, surrounded by empty chairs and abandoned wine glasses. The silence was deafening. "Thomas." Evelyn reached for her husband's arm. He pulled away. "Don't touch me." "I didn't know who he was. You have to believe me." "That's the problem, Evelyn. You didn't know who he was, but you knew what he was. That was enough for you. His skin color was enough for you to decide he didn't belong. His race was enough for you to assault him in public." "I didn't assault. You slapped him. There's blood on your ring. There are 50 videos already being uploaded to the internet showing you screaming racial slurs at one of the most powerful men in America. I didn't use slurs. You people. People like you. Your place. What do you think those are? Evelyn, terms of endearment." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Not tears of remorse, she wasn't capable of that yet, but tears of frustration, of self-pity, of fury at being caught. "Everyone is overreacting. This will blow over. These things always do." Thomas stared at her for a long moment. There was something in his eyes that Evelyn had never seen before. It took her a moment to recognize it. Disgust. "I'm going to try to save our company," he said finally. "I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if anything can undo what you've done tonight, but I'm going to try." "Of course you will. We'll get through this together like we always do." "No." Thomas's voice was quiet but absolute. "Not together. Not anymore. When this is over, if we survive this, you and I are going to have a very different conversation. About us. About everything." He walked away, leaving Evelyn standing alone in her designer gown and her diamond jewelry surrounded by the wreckage of her own making. She didn't understand yet. She couldn't understand. The full scope of what she'd done was too enormous to comprehend in a single moment. But she would learn. Over the next hours and days and weeks, she would learn exactly what it cost to slap Marcus Cole. Marcus Cole sat in the back of his town car, watching the lights of Manhattan slide past his window. His cheek still throbbed where Evelyn Harrington's ring had cut him. It would probably leave a small scar, a permanent reminder of tonight's performance. He didn't mind. He'd earned worse scars for less valuable lessons. His phone buzzed. His executive assistant, Patricia, who had been watching the gala remotely through the event's live stream. "Sir, are you all right? I saw what happened. Should I contact the police?" "Our lawyers." "No need for either, Patricia. Mrs. Harrington did me a favor." "A favor?" "She assaulted you. She revealed herself. There's a difference." Marcus touched his cheek gently. I was already suspicious of Harrington Development. Their financials were shaky. Their corporate culture seemed problematic. But I couldn't prove anything until tonight. And now I know everything I need to know about who they are and how they operate. Mrs. Harrington didn't just show me her own character. She showed me the character of a company that produced her, elevated her, and tolerated her behavior for decades. Patricia was quiet for a moment. What do you want me to do? Cancel tomorrow's meeting with Harrington Development. Permanently. And the resort deal. Award it to Reynolds Group instead. They were our second choice, but their leadership team actually treats people like human beings. That counts for something. Yes, sir. Anything else? Marcus looked out the window at the city he'd conquered, despite everything it had thrown at him. The poverty, the racism, the constant assumption that he didn't belong. Yes, one more thing. Start drafting a new policy for all coal capital investments. From now on, we don't just evaluate financials. We evaluate character. Companies that tolerate discrimination, that promote toxic leadership, that treat people the way Mrs. Harrington treats people, they don't get our money. Period. That's a significant change, sir. It's a necessary one. Tonight reminded me why I built this company in the first place. Not just to make money, to prove that success doesn't require cruelty, that power doesn't require prejudice, that the right way to do business is also the profitable way. The Harringtons won't survive this, will they? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. That depends entirely on them, on whether they're capable of real change or whether they're only capable of surface-level apologies. We'll see. And if they can't change, then they'll serve as a lesson to everyone else. Sometimes the most powerful teacher is a cautionary tale. The town car pulled up to Marcus's building, a modest brownstone he'd bought 20 years ago before anyone knew his name. He could afford any penthouse in the city now, but he'd never moved. This building reminded him where he came from, what he'd overcome, who he really was. Patricia, one last thing. Yes, sir. Thank you for everything you do. I don't say that often enough. He could hear the smile in her voice. Get some rest, sir. Tomorrow is going to be interesting. Marcus ended the call and sat in the car for another minute, watching the light in his front window. His wife Angela was still awake. She'd probably seen the videos already. She'd want to know if he was okay. She'd want to know what he planned to do next. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew one thing for certain. Evelyn Harrington had slapped the wrong man, and she was about to learn exactly how wrong she'd been. Back at the gala, Evelyn Harrington was still refusing to understand the magnitude of her mistake. "This is ridiculous," she told Margaret, who had stayed behind while the rest of their social circle had suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere. "One little incident, and everyone acts like I've committed a crime. You did assault someone, darling." I defended myself. He was being aggressive, presumptuous. He was sitting at a table. He was sitting at our table, at a table meant for real investors, real business people, people who have actually earned their success through legitimate means. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. "And how did your family earn its success?" "Evelyn, your grandfather's strip malls were built on land he bought from black families at half price during the civil rights era. Your father expanded by exploiting minority neighborhoods that banks wouldn't touch. You want to talk about legitimate means?" Evelyn stared at her oldest friend like she'd grown a second head. "Margaret, what's gotten into you?" "Reality, I think. Something that's been trying to get into you for 40 years without success." Margaret picked up her clutch. "I've defended you for a long time, Evelyn. Too long. But tonight was too much. Even for me. You're abandoning me. Now when I need support. I'm removing myself from a sinking ship. There's a difference." Margaret turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you find a way to genuinely understand what you've done. Not apologize, that's easy. Understand, that's the hard part. She walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to something Evelyn couldn't quite grasp. Alone now. Truly alone. Evelyn looked around the ballroom that had once felt like her kingdom. The whispers were everywhere. The glances were unmistakable. People who had courted her favor for decades were now actively avoiding eye contact. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Decades, maybe. Fear. But even now, even facing the first hints of her own destruction, Evelyn Harrington couldn't quite bring herself to understand why. She'd been right, hadn't she? That man didn't belong at that table. People like him didn't belong in rooms like this. That was just how things were, how they'd always been, how they should always be. The problem wasn't what she'd done. The problem was that the world had gone crazy. That's what Evelyn told herself as she finally gathered her things and headed for the exit. The world had lost its mind, forgotten its values, abandoned the natural order of things. She would fix this. She always fixed things. She would find a way to spin this, to control the narrative, to make herself the victim of an overly sensitive culture. By morning, she'd have a plan. By next week, this would all be forgotten. She was Evelyn Harrington after all. She didn't lose. But Evelyn Harrington was about to learn something that generations of privilege had hidden from her. Everyone loses eventually, and some losses can never be recovered. The sun was just beginning to set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful, really. The kind of sunset that made people stop and appreciate the world. Evelyn didn't notice. She was already planning her counterattack, already rehearsing her explanations, already rewriting the story in her head. She didn't know that by sunrise, her face would be on every news channel in America. She didn't know that by noon, her family's stock would be in freefall. She didn't know that by the end of the week, she would lose everything she'd ever taken for granted. But she would learn. The hard way. The only way people like Evelyn Harrington ever learn anything at all. Thomas Harrington didn't sleep that night. He sat in his home office, staring at his computer screen as the numbers climbed with horrifying speed. Views, shares, comments. The video of his wife slapping Marcus Cole had been online for less than 4 hours, and it had already been seen by 2 million people. 3 million. 4 million. His phone buzzed again. Another board member. Another panicked investor. Another voice demanding to know what the hell was happening and why they hadn't been warned that the CEO's wife was a ticking time bomb. Thomas let it go to voicemail. He'd stopped answering an hour ago when he realized he had nothing to say that would make any of this better. The bedroom door opened behind him. Evelyn stood there in her silk robe, her makeup still perfect, despite the late hour, her expression somewhere between defiant and confused. Thomas, come to bed. It's after 2 in the morning. I can't. You're being dramatic. This will all blow over by morning. These internet things always do. Thomas laughed. It was an ugly sound, hollow and bitter. Blow over, Evelyn. Do you have any idea what's happening right now? People are overreacting. As usual. Our stock dropped 11% in after-hours trading. 11% in 4 hours. That's $300 million in market value. Gone. Evelyn waved her hand dismissively. It'll recover. Markets fluctuate. This isn't a fluctuation. This is a collapse. Thomas finally turned to face his wife. And it's just beginning. When the markets open tomorrow morning, it's going to get worse. Much worse. You're catastrophizing. I'm being realistic. Something you've apparently never learned how to do. Evelyn's eyes flashed with anger. Don't you dare speak to me that way. I've given everything to this family. I've supported your career, raised our children, maintained our social position. Social position. Thomas stood up so abruptly that his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. What social position? Check your phone, Evelyn. Check your social media. Every friend we have is distancing themselves from us right now. Every business relationship we've built over 20 years is crumbling. That's ridiculous. Margaret would never. Margaret called me an hour ago. She said, and I quote, "I love Evelyn, but I can't be associated with this. Please understand." That was the entirety of the conversation. For the first time, something flickered across Evelyn's face. Not remorse, not yet, but the beginning of doubt. She's just being cautious. Once people calm down. People aren't going to calm down, Evelyn. Do you understand what you did tonight? You didn't just slap some random stranger. You didn't just embarrass yourself at a party. You assaulted Marcus Cole. The Marcus Cole, the most successful private investor in America, the man who was going to save our company. I didn't know who he was. That makes it worse. You attacked him because of what he looked like, because he was black, because your prejudice told you that a black man couldn't possibly belong at a table with real investors. That's not fair. It's completely fair. It's the first fair thing anyone has said to you in 40 years. Evelyn stepped back as if Thomas had struck her. In their entire marriage, he had never spoken to her like this, never challenged her, never questioned her behavior. Thomas, I was trying to protect us. That man was acting suspicious. He was too comfortable, too confident. He was clearly up to something. He was too confident, too comfortable. Thomas's voice rose to a near shout. He's worth $50 billion, Evelyn. 50 billion. He built an empire from nothing. He grew up in poverty in Detroit, worked his way through school, made his first million before he was 30, and now controls more investment capital than most countries. He has every right to be confident. He has every right to be comfortable. He earned it. So did we. My family has been in this business for 3 generations. Your family has been coasting on connections and inherited wealth for 3 generations. Marcus Cole created everything he has through actual work, actual talent, actual intelligence. Evelyn's face went red with fury. I won't stand here and listen to you praise the man who humiliated me. Humiliated you? You humiliated him. You called him a fraud. You called him a con artist. You told him he didn't belong. And then you slapped him so hard that your ring cut his face. He provoked me. By existing, by being black in your presence. What exactly did he do, Evelyn? Because I watched the videos. All of them. From every angle. He was polite. He was calm. He tried to explain who he was, and you interrupted him. You dismissed him. You attacked him. Evelyn's lower lip trembled. Not from remorse. From frustration. From the unfamiliar sensation of being challenged instead of accommodated. You're supposed to be on my side, Thomas. I can't be on your side when you're wrong. Not this time. The stakes are too high. The stakes? This is our marriage you're talking about. No, Evelyn, this is our survival, our company, our children's inheritance. Everything we have is tied up in Harrington development, and you just set it on fire. Thomas's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, and his face went even paler. What is it? Reynolds Group just issued a press release. They're announcing that Marcus Cole has chosen them for the resort development partnership, the deal we needed. The $1.5 billion deal that was supposed to save us. Evelyn stood very still. Maybe we can find another investor. Someone else who... There is no one else. Marcus Cole was our last chance. Every other major investor passed on us months ago because our financials are too shaky. Cole was willing to take a risk on us because he believed in the project. He believed in the vision. And you destroyed that with a single slap. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. What are we going to do? Evelyn's voice was small now, uncertain. The first cracks in her armor. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Thomas picked up his phone. Right now I'm going to spend the rest of the night trying to reach anyone who might still take my calls. I'm going to beg. I'm going to grovel. I'm going to do whatever it takes to slow down this disaster. I could help. I could make some calls. No. The word was sharp, final. You've done enough. The best thing you can do right now is stay quiet. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything. Don't give any interviews. I was just going to explain my side. Your side. What side? The side where you assaulted a man because of his race. The side where you used language that every civil rights organization in America is currently analyzing for hate speech. Stay quiet, Evelyn. For once in your life, just stay quiet. Thomas walked out of the room without looking back. Evelyn stood alone in his office, surrounded by the evidence of her own destruction. The computer screen still showed the video playing on loop. Her face contorted with rage, her hand raised. The impact. She watched it 3 times before she finally turned away. Even then, she couldn't quite believe that she was the villain. The next morning arrived with the inevitability of a verdict. Thomas was still awake, still working the phones, still trying to salvage something from the wreckage. His eyes were bloodshot. His suit from the previous night was wrinkled beyond repair. He looked like a man who had been fighting a war and losing. The markets opened at 9:30. By 9:35, Harrington Development stock had dropped another 22%. Thomas watched the numbers fall in real time, each decrease like a knife in his stomach. Behind him, his assistant Patricia hovered nervously, a stack of messages in her hands that grew thicker by the minute. Sir David Chen from First National is on line 2. He says it's urgent. Thomas picked up the phone with the resignation of a man picking up a weapon he knew would backfire. David, thank you for calling. Thomas. The voice on the other end was cold, businesslike, stripped of the warmth that had characterized their relationship for 15 years. I'll get straight to the point. First National is calling in your construction loans. All of them. Immediately. David, please. We've been partners for over a decade. Give me time to... There is no time, Thomas. Our board met this morning. Emergency session. The reputational risk of being associated with your company right now is too high. We're out. This is a temporary crisis. Once the news cycle moves on, the news cycle isn't moving on. Do you know what's trending on Twitter right now? #boycott Harrington, #justice for Marcus, #Harrington racism. Your wife's face is on every news channel in America. CNN just did a 15-minute segment on the history of racism in the real estate industry, using your company as the primary example. Thomas closed his eyes. How much time do I have? 60 days. That's the best I can do. After that, we're seizing the collateral. The collateral is our entire development portfolio. I know. I'm sorry, Thomas. I really am. But this decision is above my pay grade. The board was unanimous. The line went dead. Thomas set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode if he moved too quickly. Patricia, who else is calling? His assistant consulted her list with the grim efficiency of a nurse reading test results. Morrison Construction wants to talk about canceling their contract for the Atlantic City project. Reynolds Partners is calling about the Marina del Rey development. Senator Mitchell's office called. They want to express concern about your company's upcoming testimony before the Housing Committee. And your brother called 4 times. He says it's urgent. Which brother? William. Thomas exhaled slowly. William was the family lawyer. The fact that he'd called 4 times meant the legal situation was even worse than the financial one. Get William on the line. Tell everyone else I'll call them back. The call with his brother lasted 45 minutes. When it was over, Thomas sat motionless for a long time, trying to process what he'd learned. The Harrington family was facing 3 separate lawsuits. The first was from Marcus Cole himself, not for the assault, which would have been expected, but for defamation. Evelyn's public statements about him being a fraud and con artist had caused measurable damage to his business reputation, and his lawyers intended to seek full compensation. The second lawsuit came from the NAACP, who were filing a class action on behalf of minority employees and contractors who claimed discrimination by Harrington Development. The suit alleged a pattern of racist behavior stretching back decades, with Evelyn's assault on Marcus Cole as the most recent and most visible example. The third lawsuit was from their own shareholders, who claimed that Thomas had failed in his fiduciary duty by allowing his wife's behavior to damage the company's value. They were seeking his removal as CEO. Thomas rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. "Sir," Patricia was still hovering. "Your father is here." Thomas looked up. "My father? He's in Florida. He flew in this morning. He's waiting in the lobby. He says he needs to see you immediately." Thomas straightened his rumpled tie. "Send him up." Richard Harrington Sr. was 82 years old, but carried himself with the rigid authority of a man who had built an empire and never forgotten it. He walked into Thomas's office without knocking, his eyes sweeping the room like a general surveying a battlefield. "Dad, I wasn't expecting—" "Sit down, Thomas." Thomas sat. Even at 55, he still responded to his father's commands like a child. Richard remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. "I watched the videos. All of them. I read the news coverage. I spoke with my lawyers, my accountants, and 3 of our board members." Richard's voice was measured, controlled, revealing nothing of his emotions. "I want you to explain to me in your own words how you allowed this to happen." "Dad, I had no idea Evelyn was going to—" "No idea," Richard's voice sharpened. "You've been married to that woman for 23 years. You've watched her treat service workers like animals. You've heard her comments about minorities, immigrants, anyone she considers beneath her station. And you're telling me you had no idea." Thomas wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Every word his father said was true. "I thought she kept it private. I thought she knew where the lines were." "The lines?" Richard laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "There are no lines for people like Evelyn. There is only whatever she can get away with. And you enabled her. For 23 years you enabled her. I made mistakes. You made catastrophic errors in judgment that have destroyed 3 generations of work." Richard moved closer, his presence suddenly suffocating. "Do you know what I did when I was your age? I built. I created. I took risks. I made this company from nothing. And you let your wife burn it down because you were too afraid to tell her no." "Dad, that's not fair." "Fair." Richard's voice rose for the first time. "You want to talk about fair? What's not fair is that I spent 60 years building something meaningful, something lasting, and I'm going to watch it destroyed by a woman who never earned a single thing in her life." Thomas felt the words like physical blows. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to fire her, remove her from every position in this company, cut her off completely. She's my wife. She's a liability, a cancer. Every moment she remains connected to Harrington Development is another moment we're bleeding market value. I can't just—" "You can, you will." Richard's voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more frightening than his shouting. "Or I will remove you as CEO and do it myself." The threat hung in the air like smoke. "The board would never support that." "The board will support whoever can save this company. Right now, that person isn't you." Richard walked toward the door. "You have until the end of the week to make a decision, Thomas. Choose wisely." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. Thomas sat alone in his office, surrounded by the ruins of everything he'd worked for. His marriage, his company, his relationship with his father, all of it crumbling because his wife couldn't control her hatred for a single evening. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Harrington. This is Marcus Cole. I believe we should talk. My office. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone." Thomas stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. But it was also something else. Something he hadn't expected. It was an opportunity. Whether that opportunity was for salvation or destruction, Thomas couldn't tell. But at this point, he had nothing left to lose. He typed back, "I'll be there." Then he put his phone away and started making the hardest phone call of his life. "Evelyn, we need to talk. Tonight. About everything." On the other end of the line, his wife's voice was defiant as ever. "Good. Because I have some things I want to say too. I've been doing research, Thomas, about Marcus Cole, about his background. There are things people don't know, things that could change how everyone sees this situation." Thomas felt his heart sink. "Evelyn, whatever you're planning, I'm planning to fight back. That's what Harringtons do. We don't give up. We don't apologize. We fight." The line went dead. Thomas set his phone down slowly, a new kind of dread settling into his bones. His wife wasn't learning from this disaster. She was preparing to make it worse, and there wasn't a thing he could do to stop her. Thomas arrived at Cole Capital headquarters at exactly 2 o'clock the following afternoon. His hands were sweating despite the air conditioning in his car. His tie felt too tight. His heart pounded against his ribs like a prisoner demanding release. The building was not what he expected. No towering glass monument to wealth. No pretentious architecture designed to intimidate visitors. Just a modest brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that whispered old money rather than screaming new wealth. A young woman met him at the door, professional, polished. Her expression revealed nothing. "Mr. Harrington, Mr. Cole is expecting you. Please follow me." She led him through corridors lined with photographs. Thomas found himself slowing to look at them. Images of construction sites, completed buildings, community centers, schools. Each photograph showed Marcus Cole shaking hands with someone: mayors, governors, community leaders, ordinary citizens. Each photograph showed people smiling, genuine smiles, the kind you couldn't fake. "Mr. Harrington." Thomas realized he'd stopped walking. "Sorry. These photographs. Mr. Cole's projects," the assistant said simply. "The Affordable Housing Initiative, the Community Development Program, the Scholarship Fund. He believes in documenting the work, not the wealth." Thomas felt something shift in his chest. Shame, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. The assistant opened a door at the end of the hallway. "Mr. Cole will see you now." Marcus Cole sat behind a simple wooden desk that looked like it had been built by hand. No ostentation, no intimidating power displays. Just a man in a well-tailored suit, reading a document with the focused attention of someone who took his work seriously. He looked up as Thomas entered. The cut on his lip from Evelyn's ring had scabbed over a small, dark line that served as a permanent reminder of what had happened. "Mr. Harrington, please sit down." Thomas sat. His throat was dry. He'd rehearsed a dozen different opening statements on the drive over, but now every word had evaporated. Marcus studied him for a long moment. "You look terrible." "I haven't slept in 2 days." "I imagine not." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Before we begin, I want to be clear about something. This meeting isn't about revenge. I don't operate that way. I've faced racism my entire life, and I learned a long time ago that bitterness is a poison you drink hoping someone else will die." Thomas nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "This meeting is about truth, about understanding, and about deciding whether there's anything worth saving in your company or whether it's too far gone. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to. I'm not giving you anything yet." Marcus's voice was calm but firm. "First, I want you to understand something. Not just hear it. Understand it." "I'm listening." Marcus stood and walked to the window, his back to Thomas. "I grew up in Detroit, East Side. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. My father left when I was 6. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and I was the only one who made it out." Thomas wanted to interrupt, to express sympathy, but something told him to stay silent. "I was 17 when I got my first real job. A construction crew tearing down old buildings and putting up new ones. The foreman was a man named Bill Patterson. White guy, maybe 50 years old, built like a truck. He took one look at me on my first day and said, Boy, you don't belong here. You people never last more than a week. Marcus turned to face Thomas, his expression unreadable. I lasted 15 years. I became his best worker, then his crew leader, then his partner, when he got too old to swing a hammer. When he died, he left me his company. His family tried to contest the will. Said there was no way Bill would leave his life's work to a black man. The judge threw out their case in 20 minutes. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. Why would you? I'm just another black man who somehow ended up with money, so there must be some explanation other than hard work and talent. Marcus sat back down, his eyes never leaving Thomas's face. Your wife looked at me and saw a con artist, a fraud, someone who couldn't possibly belong in a room full of successful people. Do you know how many times I've been looked at that way? Thomas shook his head. Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. Hotel managers who assume I'm the valet. Restaurant hosts who try to seat me in the back near the kitchen. Security guards who follow me through stores. CEOs who refuse to shake my hand until their assistants explain who I am. I've been called every slur in the book. I've had drinks thrown in my face, doors slammed in my face, opportunities stolen from me because someone decided that my skin color told them everything they needed to know about my character. Mr. Cole, I am so sorry. Don't apologize for things you didn't do. That's cheap grace. What I want to know is whether you're willing to take responsibility for the things you did do. Thomas felt the words like a physical blow. What do you mean? I mean that your wife didn't become a racist overnight. She didn't develop her prejudices in a vacuum. She was raised in an environment that tolerated and reinforced those beliefs, and for the past 23 years, you've been part of that environment. I never encouraged. Did you ever discourage? When she made comments about the help, did you call her out? When she treated minority employees differently, did you intervene? When she used phrases like, you people, and those neighborhoods, did you ever once tell her that language was unacceptable? Thomas opened his mouth to defend himself, but the truth was already written on his face. I thought so. Marcus's voice wasn't angry, just tired. That's the thing about passive racism, Mr. Harrington. It doesn't require burning crosses or using slurs. It just requires silence. It requires looking the other way. It requires choosing comfort over confrontation. I was trying to keep the peace, to maintain my marriage. And how's that working out for you? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Thomas had no answer. Here's what's going to happen. Marcus said, his tone shifting to business. Your company is finished, not because of me, not because of revenge, because the market has already spoken. Your stock is in free fall. Your partners are fleeing. Your creditors are calling in their loans. Nothing I do or don't do will change that trajectory. Then why did you ask me here? Because I believe in second chances. Not for companies, for people. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. You have two choices, Mr. Harrington. You can go down with the ship defending your wife's behavior, pretending that this is all some misunderstanding that will blow over. Or you can do something meaningful. What kind of something? Rebuild. Not your company, your character. Start over. Learn what it actually means to treat people with dignity, regardless of what they look like. I don't understand. I'm offering you a job. Thomas blinked. A job. My foundation runs a program for real estate executives who want to learn about community development, affordable housing, minority business partnerships, actually making a difference instead of just making money. Marcus slid a folder across the desk. It pays about 1/10 of what you're making now. The work is hard. The learning curve is steep, but it's real work, meaningful work. Thomas stared at the folder like it might bite him. Why would you offer this to me? After what my wife did to you? Because I believe people can change. I've seen it happen. I've been part of it happening. Marcus stood and walked to the door. I'm not offering you redemption, Mr. Harrington. That's something you'll have to earn on your own. I'm offering you a chance to start earning it. And my wife? My marriage? Marcus paused at the door. That's not my concern. You'll have to figure that out yourself. But I'll tell you something my mother used to say. You can't fix what you won't face. and you can't face what you won't name." He opened the door. "Take a week to think about it. The offer expires after that." Thomas sat alone in Marcus Cole's office for a long time, holding the folder, feeling the weight of every choice he'd ever made pressing down on his shoulders. When he finally left, something had changed in him. He just didn't know yet whether that change would be enough. Thomas arrived home to find Evelyn waiting for him in the living room, surrounded by papers, her laptop open, her eyes bright with a manic energy he'd never seen before. "Thomas, perfect timing. You need to see what I found. Evelyn, we need to talk. I've been researching Marcus Cole all day. There are things about him that nobody knows, things that could completely change how people see this situation." Thomas felt a cold dread settle into his stomach. What kind of things? His first business venture failed. Did you know that he went bankrupt when he was 28? And there were lawsuits, allegations of unfair business practices. I found 3 separate articles questioning his methods. "Evelyn, stop. If we can show that he's not the saint everyone thinks he is, if we can demonstrate that he has his own skeletons." "Evelyn, stop." Thomas's voice cracked through the room like a whip. Evelyn froze, her finger hovering over the laptop keyboard. "What's wrong with you? I'm trying to help us." "Help us?" "By digging up dirt on the man you assaulted, by trying to destroy his reputation to save your own." "It's not dirt, it's facts. The public deserves to know. The public knows everything they need to know. They watched you slap him. They heard you call him a fraud. They saw you use language that made you sound like a segregationist from 1950. Evelyn's face flushed red. "That's not fair. I made one mistake." "One mistake, Evelyn. I've spent the last 2 days watching everything we've built collapse because of who you are. Not because of one mistake, because of a pattern of behavior that's been going on for as long as I've known you." "I don't know what you're talking about." "The way you treat servers at restaurants, the comments you make about the gardeners, the housekeepers, anyone you consider beneath you, the way you clutch your purse when a black man walks by on the street. Those are just, everyone does that." "No, Evelyn, not everyone. Just you. Just people like you." Evelyn stood up, her expression shifting from defensive to furious. "People like me. What is that supposed to mean?" "It means people who've never had to question their own prejudices, people who've never been on the receiving end of discrimination, people who've been so protected by wealth and privilege that they think their hatreds are just common sense. I am not a hateful person. You slapped a man because he was black, in front of 500 witnesses, on camera. How is that not hatred? He was acting suspicious. He was sitting at a table he didn't belong at. He belonged there more than you did, more than I did. He's accomplished more in his life than our entire family combined. And you looked at him and saw nothing but his skin color." Evelyn's lower lip trembled. For a moment, Thomas thought she might actually cry, actually feel something genuine. Then her expression hardened. "I see what's happening here. They got to you, didn't they, Marcus Cole and his people? They turned you against your own wife." "No one turned me against you, Evelyn. You did that yourself." "This is unbelievable. I'm the victim here. I'm the one being crucified by the media, abandoned by my friends, attacked by strangers online. And instead of supporting me, you're taking their side. There are no sides. There's right and there's wrong. What you did was wrong. What I did was protect our family. You destroyed our family. Don't you understand that the company is finished? The investors are gone. The lawsuits are piling up. We're going to lose everything because you couldn't treat another human being with basic dignity." Evelyn picked up her laptop and threw it against the wall. It shattered with a satisfying crash that did nothing to relieve the tension in the room. "I will not be made into a villain," she hissed. "I will not apologize for standing up for what I believe in." "What do you believe in, Evelyn? Seriously, what exactly do you believe in?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. For a long moment she just stood there breathing heavily, her fists clenched at her sides. "I believe," she finally said, that there are people who matter and people who don't. And Marcus Cole, regardless of how much money he has, will never be one of the people who matter. Thomas stared at his wife, the woman he'd married 23 years ago, the mother of his children, the partner he'd built his life with, and for the first time he saw her clearly. "I met with Marcus Cole today," he said quietly. "You what?" "He offered me a job, a chance to start over, to do something meaningful instead of just making money. A job working for him. Are you out of your mind? Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally coming to my senses. You can't be serious, after what he's done to us. He hasn't done anything to us, Evelyn. You did this, all of it. And I enabled you by staying silent for 23 years. Thomas walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" "To call our lawyer. I'm filing for divorce." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. "You wouldn't dare. Watch me. Thomas, if you walk out that door, I will destroy you. I'll take everything. The house, the money, the children. The children are adults. They'll make their own choices." Thomas paused at the doorway. "And the money, the house, take it all. I don't want anything that connects me to what we've become. You'll regret this. I already regret it. I regret every moment I stayed silent while you treated people like garbage. I regret every excuse I made for your behavior. I regret every time I chose peace over principle." He looked at her one last time. Not with hatred, not even with anger. Just with a profound, exhausted sadness. "Goodbye, Evelyn." The door closed behind him. Evelyn stood alone in the ruins of her living room, surrounded by the shattered remains of her laptop. Her papers scattered across the floor. Her world crumbling around her like sand. For the first time in her life, she had no one to blame but herself. And she still couldn't see it. The emergency board meeting convened at midnight. Every member of the Harrington Development Board was present, their faces grim, their patience exhausted. Richard Harrington Sr. sat at the head of the table, looking every one of his 82 years. The past few days had aged him visibly. The patriarch who had built an empire was watching it collapse in real time. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Richard said. "We all know why we're here. Thomas, report." Thomas stood his hands steady for the first time in days. "Our stock closed today at $12.47 per share. That's down 62% from where we were before the incident. Market cap has dropped from $2.3 billion to $890 million. 3 of our 4 major creditors have called in their loans. We have approximately 45 days before we're forced into bankruptcy." The board members absorbed this in silence. "What about the lawsuits?" Richard asked. 3 active cases. Marcus Cole's defamation suit is seeking $50 million. The NAACP class action is potentially unlimited. Their lawyers are claiming a pattern of discrimination going back decades, and the shareholder lawsuit is seeking Thomas's removal as CEO. "Is there any good news?" Thomas paused. "Yes, actually there is." The board members leaned forward. "Marcus Cole has offered us a deal, not for the company that's finished either way, but for the employees, the workers who had nothing to do with Evelyn's behavior." "What kind of deal?" "His foundation will help place our employees with other companies. Severance packages, job training, career counseling. He wants to make sure that innocent people don't suffer for the mistakes of leadership." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Why would he do that?" "Because he's a better man than any of us gave him credit for." Thomas sat back down. "Because he understands that punishment should be targeted, not indiscriminate. Because he believes in accountability, not revenge." The room was silent. "There's one condition," Thomas continued. "Evelyn has to be completely severed from the company. No position, no title, no access to company resources. Her trust fund has to be restructured so that she doesn't benefit from any recovery we might manage." "You're asking us to cut your wife out of her own family's company," one board member said. I'm telling you that it's the only way any of us survive this. And for the record—" Thomas took a deep breath. "She's not my wife anymore. I filed for divorce this afternoon." The admission rippled through the room. Richard Harrington stared at his son for a long moment. Something shifted in the old man's face. Not approval exactly, but something close to respect. "All in favor of removing Evelyn Harrington from all positions and partnerships within Harrington Development, raise your hands." Every hand in the room went up. The motion carries unanimously. Richard's voice was heavy. "God help us all." Evelyn received the news at 3 a.m., delivered by a corporate attorney who couldn't quite meet her eyes. "This is illegal," she screamed into the phone. "You can't do this to me. My grandfather founded this company." "The board's decision is final. Mrs. Harrington, your access to company facilities has been revoked. Your corporate credit cards have been canceled. Your trust fund distributions have been suspended pending legal review." I'll sue every single one of you." "That is, of course, you're right. However, I should inform you that any lawsuit would require you to testify under oath about your knowledge of discriminatory practices within the company. Given the ongoing investigations, our counsel advises that such testimony could expose you to significant personal liability." The line went dead. Evelyn threw her phone across the room. It bounced off the wall and landed at her feet, the screen cracked but still glowing. She looked around her bedroom. The silk sheets, the designer furniture, the walk-in closet full of clothes that cost more than most families earned in a year. All of it suddenly felt hollow, empty, meaningless. For the first time since the gala, Evelyn Harrington began to understand what she had lost. Not the money, not the status, not the company. She had lost the ability to hide from who she really was. And that realization, when it finally came, was more devastating than anything else she'd faced. She sank to the floor, surrounded by the artifacts of her privilege, and for the first time in 40 years, Evelyn Harrington began to cry. Not tears of self-pity, not tears of frustration, tears of recognition. The woman she had always believed herself to be refined, superior, deserving, was a lie. The woman she actually was, prejudiced, cruel, blind to her own hatred, had just destroyed everything. And now she had to figure out what to do with that truth. The tears lasted until sunrise. Evelyn sat on the floor of her bedroom, mascara streaking her face. Her designer dress wrinkled beyond repair. Watching the light slowly fill the room, she had once considered her sanctuary. Everything looked different now. The luxury that had always felt like her birthright now felt like evidence. Proof of a life built on foundations she had never bothered to examine. Her phone had stopped ringing hours ago. The friends who had once competed for her attention had gone silent. The social circle that had defined her identity had closed ranks against her. She picked up her cracked phone and scrolled through the messages she'd missed. Margaret. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I can't be seen with you right now. Maybe when this all blows over." Caroline. "The country club has suspended your membership pending review. I tried to defend you, but the board was unanimous." Jennifer. "Please don't contact me. My husband's company does business with Marcus Cole's foundation. We can't afford the association." Each message was a small death, a severing of connections she had spent decades cultivating. The social network she had believed was unbreakable had dissolved overnight like sugar in water. The doorbell rang. Evelyn didn't move. Whoever it was, she didn't want to see them. Couldn't bear to see the judgment in their eyes, the satisfaction at her downfall. The doorbell rang again. Then someone started knocking. "Mrs. Harrington, this is Deputy Martinez with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office. We need you to open the door." Evelyn's blood went cold. She forced herself to stand to check her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was unrecognizable. Hollow eyes, smeared makeup. The confident socialite who had commanded respect at charity galas looked like a refugee from her own life. She opened the door. Deputy Martinez was a young woman, maybe 30, with kind eyes that somehow made everything worse. She wasn't alone. A man in a suit stood behind her holding a folder. "Mrs. Harrington, I'm Deputy Martinez. This is Mr. Henderson from the District Attorney's office. May we come in?" Evelyn stepped aside wordlessly. They sat in her living room, the same room where she had plotted her counterattack against Marcus Cole just 24 hours ago. The shattered laptop had been cleared away, but the dent in the wall remained. "Mrs. Harrington," Mr. Henderson began, "I'll get straight to the point. The district attorney has decided not to pursue criminal assault charges against you." Evelyn felt a moment of relief before she caught the look on his face. "However, Mr. Cole's legal team has proposed an alternative arrangement, one that avoids a criminal trial but still addresses the severity of what happened." "What kind of arrangement?" Mr. Henderson opened his folder. 500 hours of community service at a facility of Mr. Cole's choosing. A public apology delivered in writing and in person. Mandatory counseling with a therapist specializing in bias and prejudice. And a contribution of $250,000 to a civil rights organization. Evelyn stared at him. "That's blackmail." "That's a gift, Mrs. Harrington. The evidence against you is overwhelming. You assaulted a man in front of 500 witnesses. The videos have been viewed over 50 million times. Any jury in America would convict you in under an hour." "I was defending myself." "From what? A man sitting at a table, a man who never touched you, never threatened you, never raised his voice to you." Deputy Martinez's voice was sharp now. "I've watched those videos, Mrs. Harrington. All of them. From every angle. You attacked an innocent man because you didn't like the color of his skin. That's not self-defense. That's assault, motivated by racial bias." The words hung in the air like smoke. "If I refuse this arrangement, then we proceed with criminal charges. Assault with intent to cause bodily harm. Given the racial element, the DA is also considering hate crime enhancements. You could be looking at 2 to 5 years in state prison." Prison. The word hit Evelyn like a physical blow. The image of herself in a cell surrounded by the kind of people she had spent her entire life avoiding was too horrific to contemplate. "I need to speak with my lawyer." "Of course. You have 48 hours to respond." Mr. Henderson stood, leaving the folder on her coffee table. "I'd encourage you to take Mr. Cole's offer seriously, Mrs. Harrington. It's far more generous than you deserve." They left without another word. Evelyn sat alone staring at the folder like it was a bomb waiting to explode. 500 hours of community service. A public apology. Counseling. It was designed to humiliate her, to break her down in front of everyone who had ever respected her. But the alternative was prison. She picked up her phone and called the only person she had left. "Mother, I need your help." Eleanor Harrington arrived an hour later. Unlike her daughter, Eleanor had maintained her composure throughout the crisis. At 74, she had seen enough of life to understand that disasters came and went, but character remained. "Tell me everything," Eleanor said, settling into a chair across from Evelyn. Evelyn explained the arrangement, the community service, the apology, the counseling, the financial penalty. When she finished, Eleanor was silent for a long moment. "Take the deal." "Mother." "Take the deal, Evelyn. It's the only sensible option." "But the humiliation—" "The humiliation," Eleanor's voice hardened. "You humiliated yourself when you slapped that man. You humiliated our entire family. Whatever embarrassment comes from this arrangement is nothing compared to what you've already done to yourself." "I can't believe you're taking their side." "There are no sides, Evelyn. There's only reality. And the reality is that you assaulted an innocent man because of his race, and now you're facing consequences." "He wasn't innocent. He was pretending to be something he wasn't. He was exactly what he was, a successful businessman attending an event he was invited to. The only person pretending to be something they weren't was you." Evelyn recoiled. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you've spent your entire life pretending to be a good person while treating people terribly. You've hidden your prejudice behind polite smiles and social niceties. You've convinced yourself that your hatred was justified because it was shared by people in your circle. I don't hate anyone. You called a man a monkey, Evelyn. You told him his people don't belong in civilized society. You slapped him hard enough to draw blood. That's not discomfort or misunderstanding. That's hatred. The words were like acid burning through every excuse Evelyn had constructed. I didn't mean... You meant exactly what you did. That's the problem. Eleanor leaned forward. Do you know why your father and I have stayed silent through all of this? Because we've been asking ourselves the same question for 3 days. Where did we go wrong? How did we raise a daughter who could do something like this? You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? We gave you everything. Private schools, European vacations, designer clothes, every privilege money could buy. But we never taught you the one thing that actually matters. What's that? That every human being deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their race, regardless of their wealth, regardless of whether they can do anything for you. Evelyn felt something cracking inside her. The defenses she had built over 4 decades were starting to crumble. I don't know how to be different, she whispered. Then learn. Eleanor's voice softened slightly. Take the deal. Do the community service. Go to the counseling. And for once in your life, actually listen to people who are different from you. And if I can't change... Eleanor stood, gathering her purse. Then you'll spend the rest of your life alone and bitter, wondering why everyone abandoned you. And you'll have no one to blame but yourself. She paused at the door. I love you, Evelyn. I always will. But I don't like who you've become. I haven't liked it for a long time. Maybe this is the wake-up call you needed. The door closed behind her. Evelyn sat in the silence, surrounded by the ruins of her life, and finally began to understand what she had lost. Thomas Harrington started his new job 3 weeks after the gala. The Cole Foundation's Community Development Office was nothing like the corporate headquarters he was used to. No corner office, no executive assistant, no reserved parking space. Just a desk and an open bullpen, surrounded by people who were too busy doing actual work to care about his family name. His supervisor was a woman named Grace Washington, 52 years old, former housing advocate, no patience for excuses. You start at the bottom like everyone else, she told him on his first day. No special treatment, no shortcuts. You want to learn this work, you learn it the hard way. I understand. Do you? Because the Thomas Harrington I read about in the papers doesn't seem like someone who understands much about hard work. Thomas felt the criticism land. He could have defended himself, could have explained that he'd worked his whole life, built projects, managed teams. But he knew what Grace meant. He'd never worked for something he couldn't buy, never struggled for something that couldn't be inherited. You're right, he said simply. I don't understand. That's why I'm here. Grace studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Good answer. First assignment. There's a community meeting tonight in Compton. Residents are fighting a developer who wants to tear down their apartment complex and build luxury condos. Your job is to listen, not talk, not offer solutions, just listen. What time? 7 o'clock. Sharp. The community meeting changed Thomas's life. He sat in the back of a church basement, surrounded by people who had never set foot in a country club, never attended a charity gala, never worried about which wine to pair with the fish course. They worried about rent increases, about eviction notices, about whether their children would have anywhere to live. An elderly black woman named Dorothy stood at the podium, her voice shaking with emotion. I've lived in that building for 43 years, raised 4 children there, buried my husband from there. And now some company from New York wants to tear it down and put up condos that none of us can afford. Where are we supposed to go? A young Latino man spoke next. My grandmother lives on the 3rd floor. She's 87 years old. She doesn't speak English. If they evict her, she'll die. Not from illness, from heartbreak. Story after story. Family after family. People fighting to hold on to the only homes they'd ever known, while developers saw nothing but profit margins and investment returns. Thomas thought about his own company, about the projects they'd built over the years. How many communities had they disrupted? How many families had they displaced? He'd never asked those questions before. Never thought to ask. After the meeting, Grace found him sitting alone in his car. "What did you learn?" "That I've been building the wrong things my entire life." Grace nodded slowly. "That's a start. Now the question is, what are you going to do about it?" Thomas didn't have an answer. Not yet. But for the first time in months, he felt something other than shame. He felt purpose. Evelyn began her community service on a Monday morning at the Riverside Community Center in East Oakland. The facility served homeless veterans, recovering addicts, and families in crisis. It was the last place on earth Evelyn Harrington would have chosen to spend 500 hours of her life. Her supervisor was a man named James Patterson, 50 years old, former Army sergeant, no tolerance for self-pity. "You're here because you have to be," he told her on the first day. "I know that. You know that. Everyone here knows that. What happens next is up to you." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you can spend the next 500 hours feeling sorry for yourself, counting down the minutes until you're free. Or you can actually learn something." James handed her an apron. "Your choice. Kitchen duty starts at 6. The first week was hell. Evelyn had never worked a service job in her life. She didn't know how to load a commercial dishwasher. She didn't know how to portion food for 300 people. She didn't know how to clean a floor that wasn't already spotless. Her hands blistered. Her back ached. Her pride took blow after blow as people she would once have dismissed without a second glance gave her instructions she struggled to follow. "You're doing it wrong," said Maria, a 50-year-old grandmother who ran the kitchen like a military operation. "The portions need to be equal. Everyone gets the same amount." "I'm trying." "Try harder. These people are hungry. They don't care about your trying." Maria wasn't cruel. She was efficient. She had been feeding homeless veterans for 12 years, and she had no patience for incompetence, especially incompetence from someone who had never had to be competent at anything. By the end of the first week, Evelyn was exhausted in ways she had never experienced. Physical exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion. The exhaustion of being invisible, of being no one special, of being just another pair of hands in a kitchen that served people she had spent her entire life ignoring. On Friday evening, she found herself sitting alone in the dining hall after everyone else had left. Her feet hurt. Her hands were raw. She wanted nothing more than to go home and never come back. Rough week. She looked up. An elderly black man had settled into the chair across from her. He was wearing a worn army jacket covered with patches and pins. His face was weathered kind, marked by decades of experiences she couldn't imagine. "You could say that." "First time working in a place like this." "First time working anywhere like this." The man nodded slowly. "I figured. You've got that look, like you're not sure whether to cry or run away." Evelyn laughed despite herself. "Both probably." "I'm Samuel. Sam. Been coming here for about 8 years now." "I'm Evelyn." "I know who you are." Sam's voice was matter-of-fact. "Saw your face on the news. You're the lady who slapped Marcus Cole." Evelyn felt her face flush with shame. "I'm not proud of that." "Shouldn't be." Sam leaned back in his chair. "But you're here now. That counts for something." "Does it? Sometimes I feel like I'm just going through the motions, serving time." "Maybe you are. Maybe you aren't. That's for you to decide." Sam was quiet for a moment. "You want to know something about Marcus Cole?" Evelyn looked up surprised. "You know him?" "Know of him. His foundation helped fund this place about 10 years ago. Kitchen renovation. New beds in the shelter. Job training program. Never asked for recognition. Never wanted his name on anything. Just wrote the check and disappeared." "I didn't know that." "Lot of things you didn't know, I imagine." Sam's voice wasn't accusatory. just honest. That's how prejudice works. You see someone's skin color and you think you know everything about them. But you don't know anything. You just know your own assumptions. The words landed like stones in still water. How do you stop? Evelyn asked quietly. How do you stop making assumptions? You start by listening, by actually seeing people instead of looking through them. Sam stood slowly, his joints creaking. I spent 2 tours in Vietnam, watched boys die who weren't old enough to vote, came home to a country that treated me like a criminal because I was black and poor and broken. He paused at the door. You know what kept me alive all these years? People who saw me. Actually saw me. Not my skin color, not my uniform, not my problems. Me. Sam nodded toward the kitchen. You want to change, start seeing people. The rest will follow. He shuffled away, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts. That night, she didn't go straight home. She sat in the dining hall for another hour, watching the last of the volunteers clean up, watching the overnight guests settle into their beds in the adjacent shelter, watching a world she had never known existed. For the first time, she began to understand what Marcus Cole had meant. Some mistakes can't be undone. But maybe, just maybe, they could be learned from. 6 weeks into her community service, Evelyn met a woman named Patricia who would change her life. Patricia Washington was 34 years old, a single mother of 3, and the hardest worker Evelyn had ever encountered. She arrived at the community center at 5 a.m. every morning to help prepare breakfast. She stayed until 8 p.m. every night to help with dinner cleanup. In between, she attended job training classes, parenting workshops, and GED study sessions. How do you do it? Evelyn asked her one afternoon, genuinely curious. How do you keep going when everything seems so hard? Patricia laughed. Hard. This isn't hard. Hard was sleeping in my car with 3 kids under 5. Hard was choosing between diapers and dinner. Hard was explaining to my babies why we couldn't go home because home didn't exist anymore. What happened? Life happened. Lost my job when the factory closed. Lost my apartment when I couldn't make rent. Lost my husband when he decided that being a father was too much responsibility. Patricia shrugged. Spent 2 years homeless before I found this place. Now I'm 3 months away from finishing my nursing degree. That's incredible. That's necessity. I don't have the luxury of giving up. My kids are counting on me. Evelyn thought about her own children, adults now living their own lives, barely speaking to her since the scandal. She had given them everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. Can I ask you something? Evelyn said. Sure. Do you know who I am? What I did? Patricia met her eyes directly. Everyone knows who you are, Evelyn. You're the lady from the news, the one who slapped that man. And you're still willing to talk to me. Why wouldn't I be? Patricia smiled slightly. You're here, aren't you? Doing the work. Showing up every day. That's more than most people would do. I don't have a choice. It's this, or prison. There's always a choice. You could have fought it, hired fancy lawyers, played the victim. Instead, you're here scrubbing pots and serving meals. That tells me something. What does it tell you? Patricia was quiet for a moment. It tells me you're trying. Maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you've got a long way to go, but you're trying. That counts for something. Evelyn felt tears welling up in her eyes. It was the first kind thing anyone had said to her in weeks. I don't deserve your kindness. Nobody deserves kindness. That's what makes it kindness. Patricia squeezed her hand. Keep showing up, Evelyn. Keep doing the work. The rest will figure itself out. That conversation haunted Evelyn for days. She began to notice things she had never noticed before. The quiet dignity of people who had nothing but refused to give up. The generosity of those who shared what little they had. The resilience of families who had been broken by systems designed to keep them down. She started asking questions, learning names, remembering stories. And slowly, painfully, the walls she had built around her heart began to crack. Marcus Cole's office received regular reports on Evelyn's progress. He read each one carefully, looking for signs of genuine change versus performative compliance. The reports were detailed. Hours worked, tasks completed, interactions observed. What interested him most were the small moments. Evelyn staying late to help a veteran fill out job applications. Evelyn learning Spanish phrases so she could communicate with elderly immigrants who didn't speak English. Evelyn donating her expensive watch to a silent auction for the shelter's renovation fund. These weren't the actions of someone just serving time. They were the actions of someone waking up. "What do you think?" Marcus asked his assistant Patricia, who had been monitoring Evelyn's progress. "I think people can change. Sometimes." "Do you think she's changing?" Patricia considered the question carefully. "I think she's starting to. Whether she finishes, that's up to her." Marcus nodded slowly. "Keep watching, and keep me informed." Because if there was one thing Marcus Cole had learned in his 50 years on this earth, it was that redemption wasn't a destination. It was a journey. And Evelyn Harrington was just beginning to take her first steps. 1 year passed. Evelyn Harrington completed her 500 hours of community service on a Tuesday afternoon, but she didn't stop coming. By then, the Riverside Community Center had become something she never expected home. Not the kind of home she had grown up in with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers. A different kind. A home built on purpose instead of privilege. On connection instead of status. "You don't have to keep showing up," James Patterson told her one morning as she tied on her apron. "Your sentence is done. You're free." "Free to do what?" Evelyn asked. "Go back to charity galas and country club lunches. Pretend the last year never happened." James studied her face. In 12 months she had changed in ways that went beyond the physical, though those changes were visible too. No more designer clothes, no more perfect manicure. Her hands were rough from work, her face lined with new understanding. "What do you want to do?" "I want to stay. I want to help. I want to—" Evelyn paused, searching for words that still felt foreign in her mouth. "I want to matter, not because of my family name, because of what I actually do." James nodded slowly. "We can always use more hands, but it won't be easy. Some of the volunteers know who you are, know what you did. They're not going to trust you just because you showed up for a year." "I know. I'll earn it." "Will you?" "I'll try. That's all I can promise." James extended his hand. Evelyn shook at a gesture that would have been unthinkable 12 months ago when she would have considered a handshake with someone like James beneath her dignity. "Welcome to the team," he said. "For real this time." Evelyn smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had felt in longer than she could remember. Thomas Harrington's transformation followed a different path. After 6 months at the Cole Foundation, he had been promoted from trainee to project coordinator. His job was to help communities fight predatory development, the exact kind of development his family's company had specialized in for 3 generations. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. "You're good at this," Grace Washington told him one afternoon, reviewing his latest proposal. "Better than I expected." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation. You understand how developers think because you were one. That makes you valuable. I was part of the problem. And now you're part of the solution. That's how change works." Grace set down the proposal. "There's something I want to show you. Come with me." She drove him to a neighborhood in South Los Angeles, a community called Willowbrook. The streets were lined with small houses, some well-maintained, others showing signs of age and neglect. Children played in front yards. Elderly residents sat on porches watching the world go by. 10 years ago, a developer wanted to tear all of this down, Grace said. Build luxury condos, displace 3,000 families. What happened? Marcus Cole happened. His foundation bought the development rights, renovated the existing housing, created a community land trust so residents would own their homes forever. Grace pointed to a small park at the end of the block. That playground was built by volunteers. The community center was funded by local businesses. None of it would exist if Marcus had let profit drive his decisions. Thomas looked around at the neighborhood, ordinary, imperfect, alive with the sounds of families living their lives. This is what I should have been building all along. Yes, it is. Grace started walking back to the car. The question is whether you're ready to commit to this work. Really commit. Not as penance for what your family did, as purpose for what you want to become. I'm ready. Prove it. Thomas spent the next 6 months proving it. He worked 18-hour days. He learned to navigate community meetings where residents viewed him with justified suspicion. He listened more than he talked. He made mistakes and owned them. He built relationships one handshake at a time. By the end of his first year at the foundation, Thomas Harrington had helped save 4 communities from predatory development. Not through money or connections, but through actual work. Actual commitment. Actual change. Marcus Cole noticed. The invitation arrived at Evelyn's small apartment on a Friday evening. She had moved out of the mansion months ago, selling it to pay legal fees and the settlement she owed to civil rights organizations. Her new home was a 2-bedroom unit in a working-class neighborhood smaller than her previous walk-in closet. She had never been happier. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive, addressed in elegant calligraphy. Inside was a single card. Mrs. Harrington, the Cole Foundation cordially invites you to attend our annual Community Leaders Gala. Your presence is requested. Marcus Cole. Evelyn stared at the invitation for a long time. A gala. The same kind of event where everything had fallen apart. The same kind of room where she had slapped Marcus Cole and destroyed her entire life. Her first instinct was to refuse, to stay safe in her new world, far from the people and places that reminded her of who she used to be. But something had changed in her. The woman who would have fled from discomfort was gone, replaced by someone willing to face hard truths. She picked up her phone and called the number on the invitation. This is Evelyn Harrington. Please tell Mr. Cole that I accept. The gala was held at the same hotel where everything had begun. Evelyn arrived alone, wearing a simple dress she had bought at a department store. Nothing like the designer gowns that had once defined her identity. She carried no expensive jewelry, no status symbols, nothing but herself. The ballroom was filled with people she didn't recognize. Community leaders, activists, social workers, nonprofit executives. A completely different crowd than the socialites and investors who had witnessed her downfall. She felt eyes on her as she entered. Whispers followed her across the room. Everyone knew who she was. Everyone remembered what she had done. Evelyn kept walking. She found a quiet corner and stood there watching the crowd, remembering the last time she had been in this room. The confidence she had felt, the superiority, the absolute certainty that she belonged here and others didn't. Mrs. Harrington. She turned. Marcus Cole stood before her, looking exactly as he had that night. Calm, composed, radiating a quiet authority that had nothing to do with wealth or status. Mr. Cole, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for accepting. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of history hanging between them. I've been receiving reports about your work at the community center, Marcus said. James Patterson speaks highly of you. James is generous. I'm still learning. We're all still learning. That's what makes us human. Marcus gestured toward a quiet alcove away from the crowd. Would you walk with me? There's something I'd like to discuss. Evelyn followed him, her heart pounding. She had imagined this conversation 1,000 times over the past year, had rehearsed apologies, explanations, justifications. Now that the moment had arrived, every prepared word had evaporated. They sat across from each other in a small seating area separated from the gala by a wall of plants. I want you to understand something, Marcus began. I didn't invite you here to humiliate you. I didn't invite you here for revenge or to make a public spectacle of your redemption. Then why? Because I believe in second chances, and because I wanted to see for myself whether you've actually changed. Evelyn met his eyes. Have I? You tell me. The question hung in the air. Evelyn thought about everything she had experienced over the past year. The community center, the people she had met, the stories she had heard, the walls that had crumbled inside her. I'm not the same person who slapped you, she said slowly. But I'm not going to pretend I'm completely different either. The prejudices I carried for 40 years don't disappear in 12 months. They're still there, buried deep, surfacing when I least expect them. That's honest. It's the truth. I catch myself making assumptions about people. I catch myself thinking thoughts I'm ashamed of. The difference is that now I catch myself. Now I question those thoughts instead of accepting them. Marcus nodded slowly. That's more than most people ever achieve. It's not enough. It's a start. That's all any of us can ask for. Evelyn felt tears building behind her eyes. I am so sorry for what I did to you. Not just the slap, everything I said, everything I believed about you without knowing anything about you. I know. I destroyed my family, my marriage, my reputation. But that's not what haunts me. What haunts me is knowing that I hurt you, that I looked at you and saw nothing but your skin color, that I reduced you to a stereotype because it was easier than seeing you as a human being. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Do you know why I invited you here tonight, Mrs. Harrington? I thought you just told me. I told you part of it. The other part is this. Marcus leaned forward. Your story has become something larger than either of us. It's being taught in corporate diversity training programs. It's being discussed in law schools. It's being used as an example of how racism operates in polite society. Evelyn winced. I know. I've seen the coverage. But here's the part most people don't know. Your transformation, your genuine transformation, has inspired hundreds of people to examine their own prejudices. The reports from the community center, the testimonials from people you've helped, the evidence that someone can actually change. I don't deserve to inspire anyone. That's not for you to decide. What matters is that you took responsibility. You did the work. You changed. Marcus stood. I'd like you to speak tonight. Evelyn's heart stopped. Speak. Tell your story. Not the sanitized version, the real one. The ugly truth about who you were and the painful process of becoming someone different. I can't. These people will hate me. Some of them will. Others will see themselves in you, will recognize their own hidden prejudices, will understand that change is possible, even for people who've done terrible things. Evelyn wanted to refuse. Every instinct in her body screamed to run, to hide, to protect herself from the judgment she knew she deserved. But hiding was what the old Evelyn would have done. The new Evelyn stood up. What do you want me to say? The truth, whatever that means to you. 45 minutes later, Evelyn Harrington stood at a podium in front of 300 strangers, about to do the hardest thing she had ever done. The room was silent, expectant, hostile. She gripped the edges of the podium and began. My name is Evelyn Harrington. 1 year ago, I slapped Marcus Cole because he was black. Not because he threatened me, not because he insulted me, because I looked at him and decided, based on nothing but the color of his skin, that he didn't belong in the same room as me. The words fell into the silence like stones into water. I grew up wealthy, privileged, protected from the consequences of my own beliefs. I was taught not directly but through 1,000 small lessons that people like me were superior, that our success was earned while others' failures were their own fault, that the social hierarchy I benefited from was natural and just. Evelyn paused, gathering strength. I never questioned those beliefs. Why would I? They served me perfectly. They allowed me to enjoy my privilege without guilt. They allowed me to dismiss entire groups of people without having to see them as human beings. She looked out at the audience. Some faces were angry, others were curious. A few, just a few, showed something like recognition. When I slapped Marcus Cole, I wasn't having a bad night. I wasn't drunk or confused or under unusual stress. I was being exactly who I was. The slap was just the visible manifestation of a lifetime of invisible prejudice. The year since then has been the hardest of my life. I lost my wealth, my marriage, my family, my social position. Everything I thought defined me was stripped away. And do you know what I discovered? She paused. I discovered that none of it had ever defined me. It had only hidden me, hidden the ugliness I carried, hidden the hatred I refused to acknowledge, hidden the truth about who I really was. Evelyn felt tears streaming down her face, but didn't wipe them away. I spent the last year working at a community center serving people I would have ignored before, listening to stories I would have dismissed, learning names I would never have bothered to remember. And slowly, painfully, I began to see what I had been blind to my entire life. That every person has dignity, that every life has value, that the assumptions I made about people based on their race, their class, their appearance, those assumptions said nothing about them and everything about me. She looked directly at Marcus Cole, who stood at the back of the room. I cannot undo what I did. I cannot erase the harm I caused. I cannot make myself innocent, but I can do the work, every day, for the rest of my life. I can choose to see people instead of stereotypes. I can choose to listen instead of assuming. I can choose to be different than who I was. That's not redemption. I don't know if redemption is possible for someone like me, but it's something. It's a start, and it's all I have to offer. She stepped away from the podium. The silence stretched for what felt like eternity. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the room, a single person began to clap. Then another, then another. It wasn't thunderous applause, it wasn't universal acceptance. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was the beginning of something that might, with time and work and commitment, become forgiveness. After the gala, Thomas found his ex-wife standing alone outside the hotel. They hadn't spoken in months. The divorce had been finalized quietly without drama. Two people recognizing that their marriage had been built on foundations too rotten to salvage. That was brave, Thomas said, standing beside her. It was terrifying. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Evelyn laughed softly. No, I suppose they're not. They stood in silence watching the city lights, two people who had once shared a life and now shared only history. I heard about your work at the foundation, Evelyn said. Grace Washington told me you've become one of their best project coordinators. Grace talks too much. She says you're making a real difference, helping communities that would have been destroyed by developers like us. Like we used to be. Yes, like we used to be. Evelyn turned to face him. I'm proud of you, Thomas. I know that might sound strange coming from me, but I am. Thank you. And I'm proud of you too. What you did in there tonight took more courage than anything I've ever done. I had a good teacher. A man named Sam. A homeless veteran who taught me that seeing people is more important than being seen. Evelyn smiled. And Marcus Cole, who showed me that power can be used for something other than dominance. Thomas nodded. Where do you go from here? Back to the community center. They offered me a permanent position, director of volunteer services. That's amazing. It's honest work. Maybe the first honest work I've ever done. Evelyn pulled her coat tighter against the evening chill. What about you? I'm launching a new initiative, helping former real estate executives transition into community development work, teaching people like us how to use our skills for good instead of exploitation. People like us. I like that. It suggests we're not alone. We're not. There are more people like us than you'd think. People who grew up with privilege and prejudice, who want to change but don't know how. Thomas paused. Maybe that's the real lesson. That change is possible, even for people who don't deserve second chances. especially for people who don't deserve second chances. They looked at each other, two strangers who had once been married, two people who had lost everything and found something better in the ruins. "Goodbye, Evelyn." "Goodbye, Thomas." He walked away into the night. Evelyn watched him go, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Marcus Cole gave one final interview about the incident exactly 1 year after the gala, where everything had changed. The reporter asked him about Evelyn Harrington, about whether he had forgiven her, about whether her transformation was genuine or just performance. Marcus considered the questions carefully before answering. Forgiveness is a complicated thing. It's not a single moment, it's a process. And it's not really about the person who wronged you, it's about whether you're willing to let go of the anger that's poisoning your own heart. Have you let go? I'm working on it, every day, just like Mrs. Harrington is working on her own transformation. Marcus paused. Here's what I know. A year ago, a woman slapped me because of my race. Today, that same woman is running volunteer programs at a community center, helping people she would have dismissed without a second thought. Is that redemption? I don't know. But it's change. Real change. And in a world that often seems hopeless, real change is worth celebrating. What about the broader impact? Your new policies have transformed how companies approach diversity and inclusion. That was never about one incident. It was about recognizing that character matters as much as capability. That how we treat people, all people, says something fundamental about who we are and what we value. Marcus smiled slightly. Mrs. Harrington did me a favor in a strange way. She forced a conversation that needed to happen. She became the example that proved why change is necessary. Do you think she's genuinely changed? I think she's genuinely trying. That's more than most people ever do, and in the end, trying is all any of us can offer. Marcus stood, signaling the interview was over. The question isn't whether one person can change. It's whether we're willing to create a world that makes change possible. That demands accountability but offers hope. That punishes cruelty but rewards growth. And are we willing? Marcus Cole looked out the window, at the city he had helped build, at the communities he had saved, at the lives he had changed. I have to believe we are. Because the alternative is despair. And I've never been interested in despair. 2 years after the slap heard around the world, Evelyn Harrington stood in front of a graduating class of community service volunteers. They were former executives, former socialites, former people of privilege who had found themselves on the wrong side of history. They had come to the program she now directed seeking something they couldn't name. A second chance, a new purpose, a way to become different than who they had been. I'm not going to tell you this is easy, Evelyn said. It's not. Changing who you are at a fundamental level is the hardest work you'll ever do. You'll fail. You'll slip back into old patterns. You'll catch yourself thinking thoughts you're ashamed of. She looked at the faces before her, uncertain, hopeful, afraid. But you'll also grow. You'll learn to see people you were trained to overlook. You'll hear stories that break your heart and rebuild it stronger. You'll discover that the privileges you thought defined you were actually walls that imprisoned you. Evelyn thought about everything she had lost: the wealth, the status, the marriage, the identity she had spent 40 years constructing. And she thought about everything she had gained: purpose, connection, the daily miracle of being useful to people who needed help. Someone asked me once if I regretted what happened, if I wished I could go back and undo the moment that destroyed my old life. She paused. The answer is no. Not because what I did was right. It wasn't. It was cruel and racist and wrong. But because that moment, that terrible, shameful moment, was the beginning of everything that came after. The destruction of who I was became the foundation for who I'm becoming. Evelyn looked at the back of the room where Marcus Cole stood watching. He had come to support the program he had helped create, the initiative that had grown from the wreckage of her own downfall. Their eyes met. He nodded slightly. She nodded back. Change is possible, Evelyn said, turning back to her students. Not easy, not fast, not guaranteed, but possible. And that possibility, that stubborn, defiant, miraculous possibility, is worth everything we have to give it. The room was silent. Then slowly the applause began. Not the polite applause of charity galas and country clubs. Real applause. The kind that comes from people who recognize truth when they hear it. Evelyn Harrington stood at the podium, tears streaming down her face, and allowed herself to feel something she had denied herself for 2 years. Pride. Not the false pride of status and privilege. Real pride. The pride of someone who had faced the worst in themselves and chosen to become better. Outside, the sun was setting over a city that had witnessed her fall and her rise. Somewhere in that city, Thomas was helping a community fight for their homes. Somewhere Marcus was planning another foundation initiative. Somewhere hundreds of people whose lives had been changed by the ripples of one slap were going about their daily lives, carrying small pieces of a story that had become larger than any of them. Evelyn didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she would ever fully escape the shadow of who she had been. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The woman who had slapped Marcus Cole was gone forever. And the woman who had replaced her was someone worth becoming. That was enough. That was everything. Because in the end, we are not defined by our worst moments, but by what we choose to do after them. We are not imprisoned by our histories, but liberated by our willingness to write new ones. We are not the sum of our failures, but the product of our determination to fail better, try harder, and never stop reaching for the people we have the potential to become. Evelyn Harrington learned that lesson the hardest way possible, and she spent the rest of her life teaching it to others.